Hi, everybody. This is Nancy Reyes from For Your Canine.
And this is Joanne Soike with For Better For Worse. Happy
How are you?
Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. I hope you all are having a great day, however you celebrate this Hallmark holiday. Let us know you're out there. Um, and today we're going to talk about an interesting topic that I thought would be kind of appropriate for Valentine's Day is how dogs handle touch and being handled and things like that. Just because it's Valentine's Day, and even though COVID has kind of put a little bit of a damper on it. Hi, Karen. Has put a little damper on our Valentine's Day about hugging and going out to eat and all that. But one of the things we wanted to kind of address was touch and how to handle and how dogs handle touch. And it seems so simple because dogs like petting and being and going to the vet, and that being handled is part of life, right, as a general practice. So one of the things we wanted to discuss was what's okay, what's not okay. And I'm sure, hi, Alicia, and kind of something to think about when next time you're asking your dog, and depending on your sport too, right? What you're asking your dog to do. So, and Melanie, I'm going to pick on her for a minute. Melanie has a dog that is very kinesthetically aware, and then we're going to talk about how that works, right? So, touch or kinesthetic awareness is how dogs handle being touched, if they enjoy it or how they react to it. A lot of people just assume the dog likes to be pet, but some dogs like it, some dogs don't, and sometimes it's not a good match because of that. So, and one of the things that Joanne always teases me about is I enjoy touch, and I'm I enjoy petting my dogs, but I don't like, kinesthetic is dogs jumping up and all those kind of things that they tend to enjoy. My cat wants to be part of the whole thing. Speaking of kinesthetic,
No,
and
Aaron says that Tom wants to know if it's okay to kiss your dog on the mouth.
absolutely, since Titan seems to love it. So anyway, so one of the things we're gonna talk a little bit about that. So kinesthetic, it's the same thing as how dogs navigate their world, right? Whether they're auditory or visual or whatever they are. So it's basically how they navigate their world. So some of the awareness is not the same as being aware of something versus how they react to it. Two different things, right? They might be aware, but they may not react to it. Like they may not like to be handled or touched, but they tolerate it. They're okay with it. Or other dogs aren't so much. So so anyway, so that's basically what we want to kind of address. So Joanne, do you have anything to add really quick?
No, I would just say, we're talking about touch today, but I want you guys to think of it in the other senses of the dog as well, because for whatever reason, we don't tend to look at touch the same way. So I'm sure we've all seen a dog, right, that has a lot of auditory awareness, right? So the dog jumps at the slightest sound or notices the slightest thing that maybe we don't hear or see. And it can have different effects. They can bark a lot, they can jump, they can become very activated. So just think about the other senses that they have. People tend to think of herding breeds as being very visual, not all of them, but right, as more of not hyper aware, but that's a sense that they're drawn to. So kinesthetic is just kind of one of those types of senses. So just mentioning that so you can think of it in the same realm as vision or auditory.
Right. Kinesthetic awareness will show itself in a couple of ways. One is tight spaces. Some dogs don't like tight spaces. Some dogs don't like surfaces. That affects them too. So a dog that doesn't like surfaces is got some type of kinesthetic sensitivity. also being, going surfaces, tight spaces, matters, and also how they handle it. So, and so so if you've ever tried to put a harness on a dog that's very kinesthetically sensitive, right? That's one thing. A lot of people's like, oh, he's just so wiggly. It could be, but chances are he really doesn't like that, being handled that way. And one of the things you really want to think about is intentful touch versus just petting. A lot of us pet our dogs, and we're not really intentful. We're just petting the dog. It's mindless. We're just doing it. We're not really intentful in doing it, which is fine. But when you try to do something like restrain them or have more intentful touch, like try to massage them, that's a different story. It becomes a different situation for the dog. So that's one. Yeah, Bliss. That's right, Melanie. So when Bliss was a puppy, one of Melanie's dogs, when you try to put the harness on her, she'd roll all over and all that. But her sensitivity to being touched was very prominent as a young puppy. So it was there at 8 weeks. It's still there. Melanie has worked on it, but it's still there, and it'll probably always be there. But when you know what's happening or what's going, what the situation is, it's fine. But a lot of people think, oh, he's just so wiggly, he doesn't like it put on. No, a lot of times it's because, yes. Well, I'm not mindlessly petting him. I'm trying to move him away off the screen, Aaron. So Milo loves to be pet, but can't stand having his feet touched. Absolutely. And that's what I mean. If you mindlessly pet the dog is one thing, but when you are intentful in what you want to do to it, it's a different story. It's a different vibe altogether. And the dogs know the difference when you're just mindlessly petting versus you really are intentful in what you want to do to the dog, whether it's to cut his nails or just even being restrained. For some dogs is a big deal. So, hi, Patty. What else? Oh, so a couple of things, how they handle it. So anxiety can make them more sensitive to being handled. Like if they're anxious, they really don't want to be handled. That's where the vet visit becomes a problem, or the groomer, because they don't want to be handled and they want to stay away from them. And I know most of us have seen pictures of kids or dogs being held or hugged that don't want to and don't like it. And people still do it anyway. They got to get used to it. Well, there's a way to do it, because that can cause some serious problems down the road. One of my husband's runs with, yes. And Judy, that's a really good example of kinesthetic awareness. A dog that rubs is kind of an interesting situation. They enjoy that kinesthetic that touch. So Judy, let me ask you a quick question. Does that dog enjoy being handled and things like that? Or does it look for that interaction, being handled and being touching you? Because that's very Vizsla-like, right? And lab-like, that they have to be touching you. It's like, I want to be touched. I want to make sure you're there for whatever reason.
Yeah, which is different though. A dog rubbing on you like a cat when they're naked is different than, say, if you put something on the dog and they're trying to rub on you. Like, for instance, my guy wears a head halty, right? He's not a rubber, but boy, you put that on him and he'll lift you off the ground with his muzzle. He doesn't like it, right? So he's trying to sort of ease up on that kinesthetic touch that he doesn't like.
So Judy says he doesn't really like to be handled. So that's interesting. So he's got some kind of sensitivity. So one of the things you can get is when anxiety will heighten that touch, the being touched.
That's more personal touch, Alicia.
And versus a dog that's panicked or hysterical or really aroused, that their kinesthetic awareness decreases because they're trying to get away. It's nothing. It's almost like if somebody if you're trying to move something, you know how strong you can get or whatever, you don't realize how much it's hurting you, or you don't realize, or sometimes you've cut yourself and you don't even notice it because you're excited or something, because it decreased that sensitivity to being cut, right? And then runs away. Yes. But so first I didn't want to be touched. Yeah, I respected that. Yeah, I respected that, so we were able to evolve. So yeah, Woodson doesn't mind being handled. He enjoys it, right, Karen? He loves it being handled. So yes, and Aaron, that's Vixen is the other dog. She gets very aroused when she's handled or when things touch her. So that's why the reason I kind of wanted to pause at you. Well, and you know what you want to notice is the things that are different, or normal. Some dogs, like Chacha puts her paws on me, but that doesn't mean she's very kinesthetic. It's pretty appropriate. So it depends on when it is. He did not for the first few years. So, for example, one of the things that's interesting about Vixen and Bliss, they become very aroused when they are being handled or when things touch them. So that's one of the things you want to think about when your dog, in nose work. Some dogs are okay in a harness, and other dogs aren't. They don't like it, and having a harness on. That's why. I had a dog that we put Amy Bukatich and I put at the time, what was that called? The body wrap. What was it called? Oh my God.
Not the Thunder shirt, right?
No. It was something else that was like a wrap, which actually aroused Lucy to the point where she was just wiggling and twirling about more than she was without it. And it was supposed to be calming. So so it didn't quite work that way. It was like a body wrap.
The Tellington, whatever it was, Tellington touch wrap. Didn't they have like the pressure points?
Yes, and it just made her just go nuts. So it was pretty funny. So
T-touch or T-touch, okay.
P-touch is a machine. But anyway, so it depends. So that's what you want to think about. While things like especially the Thunder shirt, some dogs I've seen are fine with it and it helps calm them, but other dogs it doesn't. It doesn't really calm them. It actually makes it worse. Vixen gets afraid when teens touch her and thinks that she will die because whatever might kill her. Yeah. Well, and that's what I mean. She's very kinesthetically aware, and her reaction is very activated and aroused because she's already that way. But we already saw that when she came to be with Aaron and Tom. And so it's just a matter of working things through. And that's something that's always going to be a part of them and who they are. However, you can make it better and make touch be a more pleasant thing. The problem really comes into when we are not respecting that, and we're like, you're going to like being handled, you're going to like being touched. That's where some problems might arise. The other, and especially when the dogs don't like to be handled and we are forcing it, and we've seen it, those of us who train other people's dogs, some dogs don't like it, and people want to be able to hug and squeeze the dog, and the dog doesn't like it. And that's how bites happen. Some dogs that have a kinesthetic sensitivity to it. And that also creates problems when you maybe get a dog that maybe if you are a very touchy-feely person and you have a dog that really doesn't enjoy that can be a cause for a lot of stress, because people tend to want to take that stuff very personally. And the dog is just telling you it doesn't like it. It's just like people. Some people don't like being touched a lot. There's people I've met that really, really dislike it and are more sensitive to it, where others are totally fine with it. So dogs are the same way. And sometimes we violate that respect when we just, you're going to like it. And we do that a lot more with little dogs. Like if a little dog doesn't want to be, you're just going to pick him up and pull him around. Where you're not going to do that to a 90-pound shepherd. Just won't do it.
You could try. It won't go well, but
And I have to say, like my labs tend to be more kinesthetic. That's why the jumping up, the big paws on you, the always having to touch you, the always, the very, very being on you is very, very, it's a kinesthetic. They like that physical connection. And that's why some dogs play very physically hard and other dogs don't like that. They like to, play chase more, right?
yep. And so remember though too, there's different ways, there's different parts of touch. There's different ways. So it's like Nancy mentioned in the beginning. There's some where dogs don't like to walk on strange things, the tile, the wobbly surfaces, the sticky, anything like that. They don't like anything different. There's also the human touch part of it, right? And I mean, I remember my first dog. I was like, oh, I'm going to get a dog and love her, right? And she's like, I'm good sitting over here. She did not really want to hang out. Where some dogs like to sit and lay and be touching you, that's a little different, right? That's just kind of how they use space. So I could pet her and she was okay with it. She just didn't want to hang out and be snuggly, right? So there's a difference in whether or not they want to be laying on top of you and always touching you versus they don't enjoy touch at all. Or
Right.
it activates them, or they really enjoy touch and they do want to lay on you. So those things are two separate things that are often put together.
Right. And Karen mentioned that boxers like touch too, and they always like to be touching us when sleeping. But it is different when they initiate the touch versus you initiating it. It's a big, big difference between them initiating it and you initiating it, right? She won't allow the smother unless she initiates it. Yep. I'm a lot like Serena there, Kim.
Yeah, hugger. It's all right.
No wonder I was smitten by her. I was smitten by her little attitude, for sure.
Interesting. The dog doesn't like wet feet or linoleum, right? So it's the smooth and the wet.
So then it'd be interesting, Christy, to check that. Is it just water, or is it just linoleum,
or shiny,
right? Is it because that's what I mean. Sometimes we might think it's a kinesthetic problem when it's really a visual problem. So you really want to test it, like, is it really water, or is it really wet, or is it just the shininess of the puddle, right? But letting your dog.
Yeah, Cheryl,
Yes.
giving them a cue before you're picking them up and giving them the opportunity to sort of either be ready or jump into your arms. With little dogs, especially, I know there is a lot of nerves that run in between those ribs. So a lot of times we pick dogs up kind of like that, and it can actually be pretty painful to them. So sometimes it's not necessarily a touch thing. It's just we make it uncomfortable by the way we pick up a dog. So yeah, that's a really great way, is to kind of give them that, are you ready, or some sort of a verbal cue so that they can prepare.
Oh yeah. It seems to be wet. Oh yeah. So Kirsty says it seems to be the wet. So yeah, isn't it interesting? So for whatever reason, yeah, wetness is a thing for the dog. So and there are things you can do to mitigate that, right? You can put boots on the dog if they'll allow that. But a lot of times dogs that tend to be pretty kinesthetic don't like other stuff on. And a good example was Bliss. Actually, Melanie was telling me Bliss had a coat on, and she doesn't like being. We already know she's very kinesthetic. She put a coat on her to drive her from home to the facility, and by the time she got to the facility, she had chewed off some of the pieces of the coat. She didn't like it on, and it's hard because you want to protect them and keep them warm, but anything that is on her, doesn't care for it. And the harness, it took Melanie a few different harnesses to see which one she would tolerate and she would be okay with. And even still, with the harness she has on, she does a lot of body crawling and trying to, and it's a thing that she does when she has the harness on. She doesn't do it so much when she doesn't have it on. So it's a part of who she is, right?
Yep. Mary, so address the collar grab. I'm guessing that's particular to her dog.
Yeah, well, to any dog, really. You want them to, a dog that's very kinesthetically aware, grabbing the collar could be a really difficult thing. They really aren't going to like that. You're already grabbing their collar, but you're also, it's the kinesthetic of being touched and handled. So it is something, if the dog tends to be kinesthetic and they don't really enjoy that, it's going to take some time to work up to it, right? And to get them comfortable with being touched and reaching for the collar. So there's an exercise always that you can do to help the dog be comfortable with reaching for because there are dogs that are kinesthetically sensitive and reaching for them is not an okay thing. And so the collar grab, that's why I use cookies a lot for that, right? And sometimes you're not even going to touch them. You're just going to put your hand nearby, right?
Yeah, but I'll also throw in there, right? A lot of people do the collar grab on the recall because the dog doesn't come and stay stationary, right? The dog will do a drive-by or come and then run off again. And I always tell people, right, there's never a quicker way to create a nice boxer duck and weave, right, in a dog versus training that you will grab the collar upon that recall. So, yeah, they don't, most dogs don't like that, kinesthetic or not, that collar grab.
Right. So one of the ways we tend to do it is with treats, right? And allow the dog to come into your space, because it is very different when you reach out to the dog versus them coming into your space. So Mary, one of the things we do is we offer them a treat. You bring them in, and sometimes it's just having your hand close to their head, and then eventually you work up to to grabbing their collar. So, and the big thing is for them to come into your space versus you going out into theirs. It's a big shift for the dog, and it matters a lot for them. Actually, I can do a quick demo on that with my cat. That seems to be very interested. So Joanne, if you can take some questions, I'm gonna go grab some treats.
Yep. Let's see. So yes, Karen, trust is definitely part of the touching equation, right? So if your dog came in a little nervous and not liking it, absolutely, right? The more you trust someone, the more you allow them to do, right? I'm not going to be a stranger and come and sit next to you and toss my arm over your shoulder and say, hey, how's it going today? But if you knew me, that might be a little more acceptable to you. So, right, you would know someone, allow them more into your space. So you're right. Trust is absolutely a thing. My Boston loves to be touched. In fact, she came over laying my legs. Now my leg fell asleep. Yeah, that's one of those things. Just, Chris, are you one of those people who doesn't move? I can't get up. The dog's laying on me.
So, as I will demonstrate with my beloved feline companion this time. So when you're trying to get them for a collar grab, I have a treat in my hand right here. I have my hand, and then I just get them to come into my space, right?
So you guys, you already saw it. She touched him under his chin, and he pulled back on her before he realized she had food. I don't know if you saw that.
Yep. And then he's there. See, I just put my hand and have him come into my space, right? Okay. And so that's kind of how we, good. Because of my two kitties, this one, he enjoys touch, but not quite that much. He actually used to bite when we used to touch him, right?
He still does sometimes if you do it too long, like any lovely cat.
Except for my female. So here, see how he doesn't still care for it? So I just put my hand out, put it there, and reinforce that, right? And I do the same with dogs. No different. Right.
And,
So I made a pretty positive association with being handled. Then eventually you would grab the collar.
yep. But you can still see how he's not like, it's about the food kind of right now. She's building that, but in the beginning, right? And he still isn't like pushing into her hand. Hey, I want you to touch me.
Right.
He wants touch on his terms. Absolutely, Aaron, he does. And I'll tell you, from hanging out with Mr. Fido there, he will purr and he'll come into your space and he'll rub all over you and you pet him and you pet him and then he'll turn around and be like, that's enough. And I mean, he'll put his teeth on you, right?
Mhm.
So it is definitely, he wants just enough of what he wants and then he's done. Stop it.
Right. And so and even with him, and it took a long time for us to get here, right? I mean, he looks for touch and he enjoys it a lot more now than he did, but really, really, and my other cat is so different. She will come and lay on you right away, touching you. She rubs on the dogs all the time. He never does that. So it's a pretty interesting situation with even with the cats, how they're so different.
But
Yeah.
back to kind of what Karen said before about Woodson, that her cat, as many times as I have been there, Elsa still is like, oh no, you're nothing to me, right? So the touch is very specific to known and trusted people, right? Her family. She's not really big on strangers.
Yeah, but for us, she's all over us all the time. Versus him, he's a little friendlier to people. Just the handling is a thing.
Yep.
So yeah, so it's one of those things you wanna make sure the animal you give the animal the right to. You ask the animal if it's okay. Is this going to be good for you or not? And then respect it one way or the other. And I think what happens is we get hurt because our dogs don't like it or don't want to be with us or don't enjoy it. And it doesn't mean that they don't love us. It's just, uh, you know.
You can always get a Vizsla. So Judy.
No kidding.
So Judy says, every time she is sitting and invites her lab to put front paws on her chest for a hug, her mix deliberately gets under the lab's front end and pushes the lab up and off. So I'm going to guess that's a little less about touch and a little more about no pet me, right?
Yeah.
And it would be really interesting to test. So go somewhere else where you don't do that. Call your, Call your lab in just for a normal little head petting and see if your other dog comes in and tries to push your lab out of the way that way too. I see it a lot with my two Vizsla and the Border Collie, both of them. Whoever's getting pet, the other one's like, no me, no me, no me. So can be a little bit of a jealous thing as well, but you should test it.
Can sensitivity change with age? Yeah, I would say so, Audrey. I would say that it doesn't really change, but it's different. Like it does get better in some cases, and in many cases, one of the there are a few things that dogs are born that are part of who they are. So, for example, somebody got a puppy. We assessed it, and we did see that he was going to be a little more sensitive to. He didn't like being handled so much, and that's something you can change and make better for your dog. You just have to do it the right way. So yeah, it can get better, or they can, if they have some medical issues and all that, can cause, some change in how they handle being handled and being touched and all that stuff.
So Dave's comment's actually really interesting. His retriever had issues with some flooring. When he went to the breeder and mentioned it, the breeder said she never had to put up baby gates in because none of her dogs would walk on that type of flooring. So that just goes to show you there's a big genetic component to this. Okay,
Right.
It doesn't mean that every puppy that comes out is going to have it, but it is a good possibility that they're going to pass on this kinesthetic sensitivity.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Because it's like there's some dogs. There is a genetic component to it. Absolutely. If your dog's sensitive to certain flooring and things like that, and like I said, you can make it better, but you really have to work on it. Really have to work on it. Toby's much more snuggly as he's aging. Well, yeah, they've settled into it. And I have a little Min Pin Chihuahua mix, Rizzo. She does not like to be. She likes to be handled by people she knows. And I'm gonna tell you, for so many, she's 10 now. For so many years, you'd pick her up. She was like rigor mortis. Her legs would be straight out, and she'd be not very comfortable. And no matter how I tried to, so I had to really work to help her become comfortable. And now it took maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. Finally, she was like maybe 5, where I can pick her up and she just hangs there very comfortably in my arms. It took a long time for her to be okay with that. And I had her as a puppy. She was not abused or neglected or anything. I had her when she was I rescued her from the shelter as a young puppy. So
Yep. I have arousal issues. I think you guys have heard me talk about it with my Doberman, right? Or I always say he just goes from 0 to 100 in a blink of an eye. And so, when he's in an aroused state, oh my gosh, touching makes it so much worse. He'll leap and jump, and it just makes him more aroused. Now, normally, if he's pretty chill, he's not a snuggly dog, but he does like to be pet. He enjoys it. So for him, it's situational how touch affects him, right?
and the other thing those of us who do nose work, or scent sports, barn hunt, and all the other. Sometimes we try to go ready, and pet the dog really, really quickly, and it just makes the dog go poof. Because maybe they have another dog that maybe needs that revving up. So you want to think about that, right? When you're trying to start him in agility or whatever, how touch affects the dog. 8 weeks, Judy. And
Yep.
yes, we temperament test all our dogs, or my dogs anyway, for sure. And I know Joanne does too. Actually,
Yep.
I assess Melanie's dogs and Joanne's dog, obviously, because it was from the same litter. But what was I going to say? One of the things you want to, I lost it. It went away. It's hell getting old. Oh my God. What was I going to say? I think that oh my God, it just went poof right on my head.
We've had a very long day, guys.
Yeah. One of the things you want to be respectful of is, yes, when you're temperament testing your puppies, you will see that behavior for sure. You will see the behavior. You'll see how they don't like to be touched, and you see how it affects them. Because some dogs get very aroused, and other dogs get very more avoidant, right? And usually dogs that are avoidant not always, but tend to be a little more worried. But I have dogs that don't like to be handled and touched, but they're fine. They're fine being handled by the vet and all that, and it's not a problem, right? And they're perfectly comfortable and happy about it. And yeah, right. And so that's what I mean, Judy. It depends, especially for labs, tend to be like my lab, and I think well, Noah's better, and so is 4. Their feet being handled, they really don't like it. So doing their nails is a real problem. It's a big problem. So we have to do, and even with doing the sensitivity, getting them a cookie and all that stuff, it's still very challenging. So the kinesthetic piece does come in when you're trying to get their nails done. You're trying to get all that stuff done, because it's a part of what that is. So if you have a dog that tends to be a little more kinesthetic, you might experience those things. So even if you've done everything right, you did the thing when they were puppies, you socialized them, you sensitized them to everything, you did everything right, there's still going to be a little bit of an issue there. So and you guys are going to find this very amusing. My lab doesn't really care for a Dremel or getting her nails clipped, but she's happy to do the scratch board, no problem. And you would think that would be even worse, because she's having to. Oh no, works great. She loves it. She absolutely loves it. She's able to do it and get her nails to a decent level, so they stay pretty short. So yeah, it's interesting how, but it's on her terms. She's doing it. Nobody's doing it to her. See the difference?
Yep. And I
Um,
know on the term of nails, right? I honestly, because some of this kinesthetic is genetic. I have to tell you, there's a lot of Vizslas. I mean, I think they really do, as a breed, kind of are a little more sensitive around their feet. At least all of the ones that I've known. So I have a grooming table, and I ask him to jump up, and I will do feet, and then he is able to jump down, and I'll ask him to jump back up. And usually that jump down, jump up, maybe 10 seconds. He just needs like that moment of, oh, okay, all right, I can do it again. Right. And we still have cookie parties and we still do a lot, but I want that to be sort of on his terms, because if I tried to do, all 4 feet at once, it would be too much for him.
mhm. And now, and Judy, that might be true with the sporting dogs. My 2 shepherds have no problem at all. I can do their nails, I can Dremel, I can do anything. They're totally fine being handled by anyone, anytime, anything. Not a problem. No issue whatsoever at all. So yeah. Yeah, and it's doing a lot of that handling is really, really so important when they're really young. And even if you get them at 8 weeks and maybe the breeders didn't do enough or handling them enough, especially some breeders that have lots of puppies, you need a GSD. Oh, Judy, they have other challenges. I'm just saying. Just, yes, nail time is okay, but there's other issues. But it's really important that you even you, after you get them at 8 weeks, you can do things to make it better. Good handling, really making it worth their while, making it feel good, massage, things like that. You can do early, so that when they become adults, it's natural and normal for them. And I think we don't focus on that part of training enough, right? We just assume it's going to be okay. It's like, nah, not really. Not really. Oh, you're
Yep.
not familiar with the scratch pad? Well, Sarah, my beloved canine companion is a food whore. So usually we use treats to get her to do that. And she gets a treat if she scratches her nails, and she's happy to do it anytime, any place. A friend of mine, her Fleming. Well, let me see if I can find. It's a great product. I love it. I use it all the time because I like to get her nails done, and it's really wonderful, and it works super, super well. And this is,
Yeah. Well, she looks that up. It's basically like a giant emery board. I mean, a big
yeah,
one. And
yes.
so how you train it's every dog's different, right? But like if your dog knows how to shake or give a high five, you can sort of just transition it to the board, right? Touch the board, you get a cookie. Scratch the board, you get a cookie. And I don't know, Nance, have you worked a lot on her back feet, or does she just kind of wear those down through life?
Actually, since we have such a good time, doing it, she allows it. So that's how
Oh yeah,
you
there you go,
start
the
it.
food.
Yeah.
Warn him each time that happens.
So you see, so you start with the towel, you put food, you do all that.
Next, introduce the scratch pad by laying it flat on the ground and place the washcloth on it.
See?
Allow your dog to paw the washcloth for the treat, just like in step 1. This will help get him used to the texture of the scratch pad and the way it feels under his feet. Repeat step 2 until your dog is consistently pawing the pad with both paws. Now remove the washcloth entirely and reward your dog for every paw on the scratch pad, even if he's just stepping on it. Step 4. Now we're ready to tilt the scratch pad at an angle. Repeat until your dog is comfortable and consistently pawing at the scratch pad at an angle.
And that's
Step 5. Are you having trouble getting all sides of the nail or all 4 nails on the front paw? Tilt the board around the 75-degree angle and then rotate it.
And that's how you do it.
4 nails on the front paw.
Yep. So that you got a question. How do you get your back feet done?
I do actually. I do clip her, but she's already in such a happy place about the treats. So, and you can, sometimes I have her put all four up, up on the board, and she does that. But usually I clip those very carefully because she's not as sensitive with the back feet as she is to the front, right? So we do the fronts that way, and the backs and they stay pretty short anyway. She wears them down, so it's not too bad. It works really, really well, by the way, you guys. I love it. It's one of my favorite things. I use it all the time. So, I mean, that's the only way she'll let me do her nails. Yeah, Richard, we also tried to do Jive's nails as a young puppy, but she was not having it. It was a hard time, and I didn't want to stress her out and make this an unpleasant event. So we don't. It's a great event. When she sees me pull it out, she gets so happy. And that's how she lets me do her back feet, because she's already in a good mood, I guess, because she's doing the scratch pad. It works really, really well. So I don't have too many problems with, now we have a good time. But that shows you how kinesthetic she can be, right?
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, to tell you just how much it matters to the dog. My last Vizsla, her breeder did it, and then I tried almost once a week, twice a week, just to do a little bit, and I tried for 8 months, 8 months of at least once or twice a week, tons of cookies, tons of positive. She was like, "You're not doing it." She hated it. Yeah. So, yep.
I will get you a link to this scratch pad, but I love it. I really enjoy it. I have used it very, very successfully with Jive, and it's been great. I'm so happy I was able to find it and use it so well, and that she took to it so beautifully. So I was very, very happy, and because I was really very, very sad that because my 2 shepherds are so good, they're totally fine. Totally fine. There's the scratchpadfordogs.com. And it's a good product. She does a great job, and I just love it. It's one of my favorite tools now because yeah. Yeah, no, and my shepherds are the complete opposite. And talk about kinesthetic sensitivity. Even when I pet my shepherds or physically handle my shepherds, they're very neutral. It's like, yep, they're fine, they're good. My lab, even petting her, she's like, oh, very wiggly, right? So that's a different level of kinesthetic awareness. And you want, and some dogs, they get very excited when you touch them, but they're able to, when you stop, they're like, okay, they're done. But some dogs stay very, very, very very aroused, and they jump up, and like Joanne was talking about, then their social use of space, they get on you, they paw you, they claw you. And some dog, one of the things you really want to think about is when you're trying to do something to the dog physically, and the dog really doesn't like it, you really have to find a way. You have to be creative into how they're gonna be okay being handled and being touched. And there's a way. You just have to really think outside the box about it, right?
Right. And part of the reason, not just to give your pet, some respect and some choice in the matter, but also you hope that nothing ever happens. But, there are occasions where accidents happen. And if you have already done the work to help your dog be okay, they don't have to like it, but to be okay with some touch, even if they don't enjoy it, it's going to help with say medical treatment, just tenfold, right?
Yes, and this brings up, Aaron brought this up. Your dog should be very comfortable with being handled and touched, because they have to go to the doctor or somebody else has to handle them. And also, that's how we can find abnormalities in their skin, their coat, or anything that can cause them that maybe isn't right, or things that are changing in their bodies, especially as they get older, you'll find it. So that's why I'm a pretty big proponent of massage and just handling and just going over the dog. And so this is how I work on really getting them comfortable and happy being handled and being touched, because you never know when you're going to use it and when you'll find something that's maybe abnormal or that's not good, and you can find it quicker than waiting for things to get more complicated or more challenging, right? So going over your dog on a regular basis is really important. The other thing that you can use to help make things better and for nail clippings and things like that is the Licky Mats. Those are great. I started using those when I do Jive's back feet. I put the Licky Mat down, I put stuff, on there, and she's licking away, and I'm able to get, and again, she loves it because she gets all these special things that she doesn't usually get, or doesn't get any other time except when her nails are done.
Yep. So it's interesting with Jive too, right? She still might not like it, but she likes food more. So she's willing to forego whatever's happening because food is so important to her, right?
Yeah. And that brings up another point. You really want to be careful that the dogs are tolerating it for the food. You still want them to enjoy it. So you always want to give, like Joanne was saying, give the dog the freedom to leave. If you're trying to massage and they get up to leave, okay, let them leave, let them come back, so that they can get into that rhythm of, okay, I can handle it, right? Otherwise, you're forcing it. It's no different than forcing somebody, give me a hug. I don't want to be hugged. Go give grandma a hug. I don't want to give grandma a hug. I don't want to touch her. I don't like it, right? And you're forcing it. And you're going to tolerate it, but that doesn't mean that you're going to, that you're going to be okay with it.
Yep.
No, Deb, I buy the scratch pad. I don't have time to make my own, so I go to it's scratchpadfordogs.com. I think I put the link in the on the comments. Yeah, I bought it. Some people make their own and it's great, but I don't have time, and she does such a good job of making them, and they're strong and sturdy. I love it. So I ordered from her, and then she gives you extra sandpaper and that you can read. It's great. So I just use hers, and it's wonderful. And I've been using it for a while now. So yeah, scratchpadfordogs.com works great.
Yep. And so Beth, Gidget with John. So Gidget's a rescue that they had. She was very, very fearful. They've done a really great job with her. And she's good with Beth, but even still with John, she can he's a big, tall guy and, deep voice. So she can just be a little skittish sometimes. So if you joined us when you were watching Nancy with her cat, Fido, same thing, right? Just kind of hold the cookie and let her come in to John, right? And then you can just work up from there. Come in, do like a chin rest, do a little petting, do a little more petting. And, again, just like Nancy said, with this, always have the freedom to walk away and come back, because kind of like your Labrador, Gidget is a food whore. So she definitely has worked through some of her fear just by her love of food and understanding, I really want that cookie and I'm going to try and get it. And, oh, look, I didn't die. So.
And that's really important, guys. If you get anything, when you're working on having your dogs being handled, giving them the freedom to walk away is so important.
Yep.
It's just let them walk away, let them come back. And so that's what I mean. Whatever, if your dog especially is not really comfortable being handled, then take the time to give them the ability to be comfortable. And you might not feel like you're getting very far with the process, but you are. Giving them the freedom to go and come back and go and come back you'll get so much further. You'll get so much further quicker. It just goes much faster.
And if they say no, please allow them to say no. So I'll just give you an example. My Border Collie, it has issues with smooth floors. I've been working on it. Okay. So we were doing a couple of nose work hides this weekend. And so one was on a smooth floor, and she sort of had a little freak out moment prior to even getting to that. Well, what we figured out was, Nancy figured out very quickly, was it was the hallway. So it was a tight space, then the floor. No way. No way. So when I work those floors, I do use food, and I'll just toss a cookie so it's like one little toe has to touch it, and then she can come back out, and then a foot has to touch it, and then she can come back out, and then a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And if you throw that cookie too far and the dog's like, I can't do that, totally okay. Just go back and work on it. And again, if I were going to try that in the linoleum in the hallway, I would have not had success because it was too much for her. So work at the pace of your dog. And again, let them leave, let them say no. You'll get farther.
So do you also sometimes do no handling when the dog comes back? Yes. So you'll handle, then you'll leave it, then you'll don't handle, so that your dog lay down, so that your dog doesn't say, oh, I have to go back, and also if they come back, they know that they might be handled, so it gives them that freedom. It's like, okay, I couldn't then, but I can now. I'm okay with it.
Yep.
They're already telling you they're okay, right, to be able to be handled, but without you calling them. So this is really important, of their own free will, not that you called them back. No.
So part of that is because, right, when you call them, especially if you have a dog that's really loves food, right, they might be willing to put their personal safety in jeopardy, okay, to get food. So, they may be willing to do something they're very, very uncomfortable with. They're not enjoying that process. But if they're really, really hungry, or they really, really like food, just be careful with that. Okay. Because you might not be building them up to the thing that you're trying to do. If again, that food is going to help make them put that personal safety in jeopardy. Okay. So yeah, that's kind of part of that handling, no handling. Especially if you're working on a recall, Judy, or you're working on your come or come to me. I don't ever want to damage that, because the dog is going to associate coming with touch. So I know for me, a recall is really, really important for safety reasons. And of course, I want my dog to always come back. So if I have a dog that doesn't enjoy touch or a collar grab, if I do that every time I call my dog, eventually they're going to associate that with come, and they're just going to stop coming altogether, which is totally the opposite of what we were trying to do. So
sorry guys, we had a little cat vomit situation. And Chacha was trying to eat it, so it's great. Life with dogs and cats. There you go. Yeah, that was really good point, right? And we use the same technique to try to get a dog in a pool, right? If they're not comfortable, you can lure them in, toss the treat, lure them in, toss the treat away. You always want to give the dog the autonomy to move away if they need to, right? Forcing them is not. So that's why when they're puppies and they're young, it's so important. And while some of us will only get to where the dog's gonna tolerate it, that's okay. Sometimes that's as good as it's gonna get, right? You might only get them to tolerate it. So they're not doing it. Sometimes a dog will grow to love it. Sometimes it might take a little bit more time. So, or they might just be able to tolerate, and that's it. That's all we're getting. And that's okay, right? Depending on your dog. It's okay if they can just tolerate it. It's ideally you want them to love it, but it is what it is. Sometimes we all have to tolerate things we don't like either. So sometimes, as long as they can tolerate it, we're good. That's a good thing.
Right.
Yeah. I have to say, Deb, you do a really good job with your dogs. Being handled, picked up. None of your dogs seem to have an issue with it. But Debbie does quite a lot of time doing that. So yes, not one of her dogs, they all is like, okay, this is what happens. This is how it goes. Very, very happy about being handled and picked up. It's great. But Debbie's breeds Shelties, And that's exactly my point, right?
Now, tugging, on the other hand, apparently you introduced them to a Malinois at 6 weeks old. So
there's some Malinois in there somewhere.
they're Chalinois. That's what they are.
Chalinois. How do you manage the non-negotiable need for touching, petting, wearing boots in the winter? Yeah, right. So Deb, it's finding the right boot, I gotta say. Because and I Noelle sells the Husky boots at the facility, and those seem to be a good solution because they still feel the floor. A lot of the boots that they sell with padding is not the ground. It's not great. So, and sometimes, Deb, you sometimes you might want to work on putting the boots on when she doesn't have to go out and have them walk around in the house with them on, when you're not taking her outside, so she gets more used to it, or she gets some kind of treats that she would normally get for that. So doing it when you're not having to go outside, so it's not such a fight, and just getting her to wear the boots around the house every so often would probably be very helpful too.
Yeah, because I mean, remember from a human perspective, right? If there's something that you don't really enjoy, I don't know, whatever, it's going, craft shopping with your wife, or I mean, whatever it is, right? If it's something you don't really enjoy, and then let's say I don't enjoy having to go out and do something with my significant other, right? And then you're going to ask me to go out in this weather and do the same thing. I hate it more, right? So it's like if it's super hot, super cold, something is different in the environment that's a little harsh in and of itself. It can just make something harder for the dog. So like this weather, dogs don't even want to go outside anyway to pee or go for a walk, right? And then we're gonna try and work on boots. I mean, I know you have to because of where you live and how you exercise your dog, but if somebody has an alternative to not, maybe we don't go for a walk today if it's really, really horrible and my dog's having that off day with a move, right? But yeah, in the meantime, while you're trying to find a good one, kind of like Nancy said.
Yeah, we're having more. We're around. It's like ladies when I started really wearing very, very high heels many years ago. I walked around in them in my house for a little while before I went out in the world, so that I wouldn't fall down. So until I got more, very skilled at it. But yes, it took me a while to practice walking around on those things, so that I could look more polished back in the day. So yeah, just having them more around the house would be helpful and be more comfortable. And Deb, I'll be honest, I know they don't get as the padded ones don't get as wet but the bottom line is she more comfortable in the Husky boots or not? And yeah, yeah, they might get a little more colder, but she'll at least walk in them, right? So if she's not digging the padded ones, then you have to see which ones she tolerates better, right? And so that's what I mean. The non-negotiables, you want to get to them before you need it, before the dog has to be handled by a vet or a groomer or whatever. And you want to know how your dog handles touch, because it's not something that we automatically do. We just notice it when it's a problem, right? We just notice it when it's an issue and the dogs are not happy, or they're not enjoying it, or they get a little crazy, or we only notice it when it becomes an issue. A lot of times we don't even notice it's a problem or it's an issue for the dog. And for some dogs it's not. Like my Shepherds, being handled, touched, doing whatever, not a problem at all. They don't care. They can be handled without an issue at all.
Yeah, and I mean it's good in the times that we're living in now, especially if you have a puppy in the last year, and who knows when vet clinics will let us go back in with our dogs. So if you have a dog that might have a little sensitivity to touch or something, it's hard to send them away with somebody else, right? Because if you've been working really hard and they have to do a big restrain to get something done that the dog needs, it could set your training back, right? So progressing on that by yourself and where they are comfortable and where you can see how they're dealing with things It's really, really important before they have to go into a situation where, something might happen to them.
Dave, you are right. Steak and boots are a wonderful combination.
That sounds like a good restaurant name, like a steakhouse.
Steak and boots.
I don't know, it's a steak and boots.
She's more comfortable in the husky boots now. I'm working on her and doing nose work in them. Yeah, I think that's not a bad idea, right? Because they are more comfortable. Yeah, there's a little bit more wear and tear with those. They don't have any padding, but I think the dogs do. Again, it's a kinesthetic thing, right? They can feel the ground even though they're not feeling it's cold and all that, but they're not feeling all the, it's not freezing their feet. It's at least got that. It's a thin layer, but it's a layer nonetheless. So, yeah. And then, doing nose work in boots. And those of you who, they're very thin. They're thin little material that you put over and Velcro onto their feet.
Yeah, it's almost like a canvas coat, I would say. It's not totally waterproof, but it has like a waterproofy feature to it, kind of like like I would call it like a canvas coat, right? And it's basically two pieces stitched together, and then there's Velcro on the top. So when you describe it, kind of like coat material.
Yeah. Yes. And they're not waterproof, and they do freeze. But Noelle sells them at the facility. Salt isn't getting, no, the nails don't stick out. The whole foot is covered in that material, and then it's Velcroed up on the wrist. So no, the nails don't stick out. The whole foot is in this boot. Touch is not a problem. Yeah, your dog loves being touched. So, and yes, they do get wet for sure. So you have to wash them. That's what I mean. It's more work for the handler because you have to, every time they use them, they got to take them out. You got to dry them off and got to wash them because they do get they do get wet. Anyway, so any other questions about? There's so much more to being dogs being handled and touched. It's one of those things that we don't think about a lot, but I think going forward, and because it's a lovely Valentine's Day, I thought something we can think about and work with our dogs on, and see, and actually really pay attention and be aware how your dog handles being touched. And when I mean touch, is intentful touch, being handled, being probed, being restrained. Those are all things that you have to. Those are all things that you have to work on pretty regularly, and more so when the dogs are young, because it just makes, as they get older, so much easier. So. Husky bushy tolerates them, but can't do nose work, and she keeps the snow traces. Yeah, yep, those are really, really great. If you're doing nose work and see your dog stresses, struggling with the head, would you pet the dog? Yeah. Well, Alicia, that's a really good question. She asked if the dog is struggling with the hide or whatever, would you pet the dog if the dog finds that pleasurable? So that's what I mean. You really have to know your dog. Does your dog find that comforting? Because for some dogs, you can just be verbally saying, it's okay, it's going to be all right, and they go on. Or some dogs, that petting on the side or touching them is very comforting for them. So it really depends on your dog and what they're comfortable with. So that's what I mean. It's like really handle your dogs, touch your dogs, see how they handle being restrained by you. Do they the minute you restrain them, do they leave you and not come back? Or do they stay there and want more? Right? Mm-hmm. It's really important, and it's easy to test on with your dog. If you hold them, and will they stay with you or not? So these are things you want to really think about and see how your dogs handle that, if they like it or not. And again, a lot of it, you want to not prompt it, because if you prompt it, like Joanne said, it's a command. It's not on their own. So like any relationship, if you are married or your significant other does not like to be handled a lot and you're really handsy, you're going to have to figure out how to manage that. Or if you're or if you're you're a so same relationship with the dog, right? Is your dog a snuggler or more of a, hey, I can see you from here? Either way, you want to respect each other's space, and people can be pretty big space invaders, so we want to really be mindful of that. And if your dog likes to, if you have a golden retriever like Karen mentioned earlier, and that's what they want to be handled all the time, go for it. Snuggle
Or
away.
not.
Or
Or
not.
not if it's a big giant shepherd,
I know. Yes, because it is, I'll be honest, it is a little thing. My male shepherd loves to be handled and loves to be touching me and likes to be on me constantly. And I'm okay with it occasionally, but all the time makes me crazy. So it's a little challenge we're having at the moment.
I told him he should come over here and live in the Vizsla land, and there will be lots of snuggles and love. So we should trade dogs every now and again.
Yeah, that's right. All right, guys. Happy Valentine's Day. Thank you for checking in tonight. Support. We will definitely have to talk about separation anxiety. That is on our docket to talk about.
It'll be a good one as the world opens back up and people go back to work,
Yep.
So it's a good one.
Yep. All right, all. Happy Valentine's. Good night. And thank you for tuning in tonight. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.